In this video, we delve into the shocking true stories of educators who betrayed the ultimate trust. Classrooms, once sanctuaries of learning, became the silent stages for unspeakable acts. These are the chilling accounts of teachers who didn't just break rules, but shattered innocence and left behind lasting scars. Prepare to uncover the dark secrets hidden in plain sight. 1. Morton Berger. In the quiet, sun-drenched Phoenix suburbs, Morton Berger was a name that spelled trust. Born in 1970, he was your typical high school history teacher, calm, methodical, utterly unassuming. Parents trusted him, students respected him, no one. Not a single soul suspected the chilling, insidious truth festering beneath that placid exterior. That perfect facade began to crack in early 2002. A routine internet investigation, a digital whisper in the vast noise of the web, led state officials to an IP address. It belonged to Morton Berger's modest home, the very picture of suburban normalcy. What they uncovered next wasn't just disturbing. It was a gut-wrenching plunge into depravity that would rock Arizona's legal system and send shockwaves across the entire nation. His crime: child pornography, not just a few images, not a fleeting mistake. Police raiding his house found a meticulously organized cache of over 200 illegal images, a staggering collection depicting the exploitation and suffering of children. Berger didn't create these images, nor did he physically harm any child. His crime was possession, but the cold, clinical precision with which he collected these abominations showed a chilling, deliberate intent. When confronted, Berger offered no resistance, no defiant denial. He admitted his actions quietly, even expressing a semblance of remorse. But remorse in the eyes of Arizona's justice system was nowhere near enough to atone for such a profound transgression. He was charged with 20 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, each representing one of the 20 most egregious images prosecutors chose to bring forward. And here, Morton Berger's story transcends mere true crime, venturing into the realm of legal history. Arizona law mandated that each of these 20 counts carried a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years, with no possibility of parole or early release. Crucially, the law also required these sentences to be served consecutively, not concurrently. Think about that, not a single 10-year term, but 10 years for each image back to back. The consequence was unprecedented. For a crime of this nature, Morton Berger, then just 33, was sentenced in 2003 to an astonishing, almost unfathomable 200 years in prison, without parole. He would die behind bars his remaining life. A stark, confined eternity. This wasn't a sentence for physical contact. It was a defiant declaration from the court that mere possession of these vile images was an act of profound complicity fueling a market of unimaginable suffering. The ruling ignited a national debate. Civil liberties groups cried foul, arguing the 200-year term for non-contact possession was excessive, disproportionate. The irony was stark. Someone convicted of actual child molestation might serve less time. Yet for child advocates, the sentence was a necessary, unyielding message, a clear signal that the justice system would show no mercy to anyone contributing to the demand for child exploitation. Berger's defense appealed, citing the Eighth Amendment's protection against cruel and unusual punishment, but the Arizona Supreme Court stood firm. Every subsequent attempt at clemency or sentence reduction has failed. Morton Berger, the unassuming history teacher, is now one of the longest-serving prisoners in American history for a crime involving no physical contact. His name has become a legal landmark, a chilling testament to how far the justice system will stretch to protect the most vulnerable. Beyond the headlines and courtrooms, a more haunting truth remains. Morton Berger wasn't your stereotypical monster. He was a man who walked among us living an ordinary life, teaching in quiet classrooms. Yet beneath that veneer, he harbored a darkness so profound, it left no physical bruises, but utterly destroyed innocence just the same. His case is a chilling warning. Evil doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sits quietly at a desk hiding in plain sight until it's far too late. 2. Stefan Zappey. Our next case pulls back the curtain on a different kind of sanctuary, the school within a U.S. military installation. Here the children of service members, often navigating the complexities of deployment and separation, expect absolute safety. For years, Stefan Zappey fit right in. Employed by the U.S. Department of Defense Education. Activity DODEA, he was just another teacher at an elementary school in Germany. Polite, predictable, professional. No one saw the rot beneath the surface. Zappey was born in 1976. His facade of normalcy allowed him to operate with chilling impunity. Between 2006 and 2010, federal investigators say Zappey committed acts that didn't just betray his students. They shattered the very framework of trust underpinning the DODEA system. He was later charged with sexually abusing 4 children during his time as an elementary school teacher overseas. These weren't ambiguous claims. These were detailed, substantiated allegations brought to light by victims finally ready to speak after years of silent torment. The nature of his crime was aggravated. Sexual abuse of a child. Zappey exploited the very system that empowered him. Teaching at a military school provided access to a tightly controlled yet often insulated community. Parents were frequently deployed, and teachers were often seen as extensions of the military structure itself, fostering an environment where Zappey could operate with dangerously little scrutiny. He cultivated trust, then meticulously broke it down. The stories from the victims were consistent, haunting, and deeply disturbing, a calculated pattern of grooming and exploitation. Federal authorities, including the FBI, understood the gravity. This wasn't just criminal behavior. It was a profound breach of federal trust. Because Zappey was a U.S. government employee overseas, the case fell under federal jurisdiction. He was extradited back to the United States. In 2012, he stood trial in U.S. District Court on multiple counts of aggravated sexual abuse. The trial painted a harrowing picture. Survivors, now brave enough to testify, described years of confusion, shame, and betrayal. These were children who thought they were imagining things until they realized they weren't alone. Prosecutors made it clear Zappey's actions were not impulsive. They were methodical, calculated, predatory. When the verdict came down, it was decisive: life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. A rare sentence, but one that reflected the unimaginable gravity of his crimes. The court left no room for doubt. Zappey had forfeited any claim to freedom, having used his position of trust to violate the most basic moral and legal boundaries. The consequences extended far beyond Zappey's cell. His sentence stands as one of the most severe ever handed to a Department of Defense educator. It forced a reckoning within the entire DODEA system. Internal policies were reevaluated, safeguards were tightened, background check protocols were updated. If a predator could hide in plain sight on a U.S. military base, what did that mean for other institutions where oversight might be even weaker? Stefan Zappey is now locked away. His classroom replaced by a cold cell. His title is no longer teacher, but inmate. The children he once harmed have grown into young adults carrying both scars and an incredible strength. His case is a somber reminder: even in the most structured, respected environments, evil can sometimes sit quietly at the front of the room, waiting to strike. 3. Ricardo Ortiz. To those around him in El Paso, Texas, he was simply another educator. A man who walked into school each day, greeted students with a calm nod, and returned home to a quiet neighborhood. Like countless teachers across the nation, his routine seemed utterly unremarkable. But behind that quiet facade, Ortiz harbored a disturbing secret, one that would eventually bring federal investigators to his doorstep, sparking a multi-agency investigation and ending in a rare, devastating sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The story of Ricardo Ortiz begins, as many do in our digital age, with a tip. In 2022, federal cybercrime investigators received intelligence. A user was suspected of inappropriate online communication with minors. This wasn't a local incident. It spanned state lines. And it wasn't a one-time error. As investigators meticulously traced the digital footprint, they followed it to a device registered in El Paso. That's when Ricardo Ortiz's name first appeared in the case file. His birth year is not publicly available, but his actions would forever define his existence. At first glance, the connection seemed unlikely. Ortiz was a teacher, a position of inherent trust, especially in a school setting. But when federal agents obtained a warrant and searched his home, the illusion quickly unraveled. On his devices, investigators discovered conversations alarming in both content and scope. They found evidence of ongoing communication with several minors conducted through various messaging apps and digital platforms. These weren't casual chats. According to court documents, the messages revealed a methodical, calculated effort to groom, manipulate, and exploit vulnerable individuals over an extended period. The nature of his crime fell under federal statutes, covering coercion and enticement of a minor and distribution/possession of child sexual abuse material. It's crucial to be precise here. There were no allegations of physical contact. Ortiz never met any of these minors in person, but under U.S. federal law, that distinction does not diminish the severity of the crime. The messages showed clear efforts to establish trust, then escalate those relationships into more inappropriate territory. Ortiz posed as someone younger, altered his identity, sent misleading photos, and used carefully constructed language to lower his victims' defenses. When investigators recovered images and other digital materials from his devices, it became evident that some of the minors had been manipulated into producing content themselves, an act that under federal law constitutes the production and possession of illegal material. What made the case even more serious, more profoundly troubling, was Ortiz's profession. Prosecutors argued that his role as a teacher that gave him a unique understanding of how to build trust with young people, how to navigate boundaries, and how to use his authority to manipulate rather than protect. Though his online activity occurred outside the classroom, the court viewed his dual roles as directly connected, a profound betrayal of public trust. The community was stunned, parents were furious, colleagues were blindsided, many having worked with Ortiz for years without a hint of suspicion. But in the digital world, danger can be carefully hidden: one app, one account, one encrypted message at a time. In federal court, Ortiz faced charges carrying some of the harshest penalties in the federal criminal system. Prosecutors presented an undeniable case. Ortiz used technology to exploit vulnerable minors for personal gratification, doing so over an extended period. The defense's plea for leniency based on the lack of physical contact and Ortiz's expressed remorse was dismissed. The judge handed down the maximum sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The consequences of this sentence resonated far beyond one man. It sent a broader message to educators, to predators hiding behind screens, and to the institutions that employ them. It reminded the country that exploitation doesn't always happen in person. In the digital age, it can happen silently, invisibly, behind the glow of a screen, and when it does, the law will still hold offenders fully accountable. Today, Ricardo Ortiz remains in federal custody serving a life sentence. He will never return to the classroom. He will never again hold a position of trust. His actions have left a permanent scar not only on the victims, but on a community that once believed in him. 4. Jeremy Pacquia Ye. Our next case brings us to San Bruno, California, a quiet suburb just outside San Francisco. Here, Jeremy Pacquia Ye, born in 1989, was once seen as a rising figure in the local education system. A soft-spoken elementary school teacher, he taught the youngest and most vulnerable first and second graders at El Crystal Elementary School and Allen Elementary School. He was the kind of teacher parents never thought twice about. Kind, approachable, seemingly devoted to his work. But in 2020, that meticulously crafted image would come crashing down in one of the most disturbing criminal cases in recent California education history. The investigation into Ye began, as too many do, with a whisper. A child too young to fully articulate made an uncomfortable remark to a parent. It was subtle, vague, but unsettling enough to trigger deep concern. The parent notified school administrators, who in turn contacted local authorities. What followed was a series of careful, methodical interviews with students, teachers, and parents guided by trained investigators, specializing in child welfare. As those interviews progressed, a chilling pattern began to emerge. Multiple children, all under the age of 8, told similar stories. While their words weren't identical, the themes were consistent and deeply disturbing. It became horrifyingly clear these children were describing real experiences. With cautious urgency, the San Bruno Police Department obtained a search warrant for Ye's home. What they discovered confirmed the worst suspicions inside Ye's residence. Law enforcement found damning digital evidence, including photos and videos that indicated prolonged and calculated abuse. Investigators later testified that this content was not random or opportunistic. It was organized, cataloged, and clearly tied to specific victims. The nature of his crime was child molestation. Ye had meticulously exploited his trusted position as a teacher to gain access to the most vulnerable members of society. Very young children, many of whom had no ability to understand or articulate what was happening to them. This abuse occurred between 2016 and 2022. Reports indicate victims were touched on their genitals and buttocks, and in at least one instance a child was raped. Disturbingly, a lawsuit against the school district later alleged that the first victim came forward in 2017, but was called a liar by the El Crystal Elementary administration, allowing Ye to continue his crimes for years. The charges came swiftly and decisively. Ye was arrested and charged with 17 counts of felony child molestation involving multiple victims over several years. These were not vague accusations. Prosecutors had names, dates, digital timestamps, and consistent gut-wrenching testimony from young children backed by physical and forensic evidence. Ye's actions, they argued, showed premeditation and a blatant abuse of power. In the courtroom, prosecutors laid bare the chilling truth. Ye used his classroom not to educate but to exploit. The trial painted a harrowing picture. Victims, some still too young to fully comprehend what had happened, were represented by child advocates, therapists, and family members. Ye's defense attempted to suppress evidence, but much of it was digitally preserved and forensically verified. The case against him was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for just 2 days before delivering a unanimous verdict, guilty on all 17 felony counts. At sentencing in 2023, though some reports indicated a sentencing date in April 2025. The conviction was in 2023. The judge made it clear that Ye's actions warranted the most severe response under California law. He was sentenced to 200 years to life in prison, effectively ensuring he would never again walk free. The judge's words were unsparing when describing the crimes as monstrous, and the betrayal of trust as beyond calculation. Jeremy Ye had not only abused his position as a teacher, he had done so repeatedly, with full awareness and without remorse. No second chances, no parole. Only a lifetime behind bars. The consequences of Ye's actions sent shockwaves through the Bay Area. San Bruno, a city proud of its close-knit schools, was rocked by the realization that such crimes could happen right under their noses. Parents demanded deeper background checks, better teacher training, and more transparent reporting systems. School districts across California responded with policy reforms, including more robust monitoring and quicker responses to allegations. Ye's case became more than a local scandal. It became a cautionary tale, a devastating example of how long-term abuse can hide in plain sight, especially when the abuser holds power and routine access to children. It served as a painful reminder safety systems, no matter how well designed, can still fail when vigilance is replaced by assumption and initial reports are dismissed. 5. Gilbert Joseph Trujillo. Gilbert Joseph Trujillo, born in 1949, spent years as an elementary school teacher at DuPont Elementary in Commerce City, Colorado. To all appearances, he was a dedicated educator guiding 3rd through 5th graders, but behind that seemingly ordinary facade, Trujillo was systematically betraying the trust of the children under his care, turning his very classroom into a hidden nightmare. In June 2015, the truth exploded. Trujillo was arrested and charged with multiple counts of sexual assault on children. The investigation shockingly revealed that his horrific offenses had spanned from 2005 to 2011, occurring while he was still teaching. He had quietly resigned from the district in 2011, escaping scrutiny for years. The nature of his crime was the sexual assault of 6 former female students, all between 9 and 10 years old at the time. Trujillo exploited his position, isolating these young girls in his classroom during non-instructional time. He'd close the blinds, lock the door, and engage in inappropriate physical contact, including sexually explicit touching. He groomed them with gifts, candy, jewelry notes, manipulating their innocence into silence. But the most infuriating detail, Trujillo's abuse wasn't a sudden descent. In 2008, a full 7 years before his arrest, the school district had issued him a written reprimand. Concerns about inappropriate behavior, specifically hugging students and giving them gifts, had surfaced. He was explicitly ordered not to be alone with students, to avoid all physical contact, and to keep his classroom door open. Yet despite this clear directive, Trujillo continued to teach for another 3 years, his actions unchecked. The district later admitted its response had been woefully insufficient. Trujillo faced 11 counts of sexual assault. The trial in early 2017 brought the victim's harrowing testimony to light. In February 2017, a jury found Gilbert Joseph Trujillo guilty on 4 counts, despite attempting self-harm in custody and refusing to appear. His sentencing proceeded in April 2017. He was condemned to 25 years to life in prison, eligible for parole only after serving a minimum of 25 years. The judge's words were resolute. Trujillo had violated the trust placed in him as an educator and a caretaker of children. The community was left asking why early warning signs were ignored, why the reprimand failed. Trujillo's case became a stark example of how predatory grooming can thrive in institutional environments when oversight is lax and intervention is insufficient. The Adams 14 district has since implemented stricter protocols, but for the victims and the community, the scars remain. Gilbert Joseph Trujillo remains incarcerated, a chilling testament to the devastating cost when trust is betrayed and a system fails to decisively protect its most vulnerable. 6. Kevin Ricks. Few educators leave behind a legacy as disturbing as Kevin Ricks. Born in 1950, Ricks was an English teacher who crisscrossed states and even continents: Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, and Japan. On the surface, he was accomplished, personable writing, glowing recommendations. But beneath that polished exterior lay a profound darkness, a decades-long trail of allegations, unexplained resignations, and a chilling pattern of abuse that went undetected for far too long. Ricks's career spanned decades. He cultivated an image of a dedicated mentor, particularly to teenage boys. He'd invite them to stay late, offer guidance, organize international trips, all part of a calculated web of control. He blurred boundaries, gaining absolute trust to operate without suspicion. His brilliance was in silent, insidious grooming, exploiting his position without immediate detection. In 2010, his reign of terror began to crumble. A courageous 16-year-old student in Virginia came forward, alleging Ricks had violated him. This single brave account triggered an investigation that quickly expanded into a national reckoning. When Ricks's home was searched, authorities found meticulously detailed journals, logs of interactions with students spanning over 30 years. These weren't harmless notes. They chronicled a horrifying, deliberate pattern of predatory conduct. Alongside the journals, investigators uncovered illegal digital material involving minors taken without consent. Some victims were unaware they had even been recorded. The files from hidden cameras and external drives painted a horrifying picture. Kevin Ricks had systematically abused his position as a teacher, committing acts of child sexual exploitation across multiple states and countries. The agonizing question was immediate. Why wasn't he caught sooner? The answer revealed a critical, systemic failure. Ricks had quietly resigned from several teaching positions over the years following internal complaints or suspicious circumstances. But these departures were rarely flagged in public databases. He'd simply move on, sometimes, even receiving positive references from colleagues who were either unaware or lacked concrete proof. The complete lack of centralized background checks across states allowed him to continue teaching and, tragically, to continue offending for far too long. In 2011, Ricks pleaded guilty in federal court to production and possession of child sexual exploitation material. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. For many, the sentence felt profoundly insufficient given the sheer scale of his abuse. The consequences of Ricks's actions were monumental. His conviction forced school districts nationwide to urgently reevaluate hiring practices and cross-state communication. His case, more than almost any other, exposed the desperate need for national databases to track teacher misconduct, preventing predators from simply moving to new, unsuspecting communities. Today, Kevin Ricks remains incarcerated. His story is now a mandatory case study in educator training, law enforcement seminars, and psychology programs. A chilling testament to long-term manipulation, systemic failure, and the quiet danger of unchecked authority. Ricks's case is a stark warning. When systems fail to communicate, when concerns are ignored, and when image is prioritized over accountability, the door opens for the worst among us. Trust in any school is vital, but equally vital is rigorous oversight. Because behind a confident voice and a clean record, true evil can hide in plain sight. 7. William Michael Stankewicz. On February 2, 2001, the halls of North Hopewell Winterstown Elementary School in Red Lion, Pennsylvania, hummed with the ordinary rhythm of a school day. Morning routines, the rustle of backpacks, the chatter of children. But within moments, that quiet normalcy was violently shattered. A man walked through the doors with a knife in his hand and a heart consumed by rage. His name was William Michael Stankewicz. Born in 1951, what he did that day would become one of the most horrifying school attacks in Pennsylvania history. Stankewicz was no stranger to the education system. In fact, he had once been a teacher himself, a music instructor in North Carolina years earlier. He'd built a reputation as a soft-spoken educator deeply involved with his students. But beneath that calm surface was a man unraveling. Over the years, Stankiewicz's personal life had spiraled into bitterness and anger. His rage stemmed from a festering, all-consuming child custody dispute involving his former wife. When she obtained a protective order against him, his fury intensified, fixating on the system, judges, counselors, and tragically, anyone he perceived as connected to his grievances. He blamed them all for his perceived injustices, consumed by this personal vendetta. Stankiewicz drove to the elementary school. His targets were specific: his former wife's attorney, who also represented the school district, and the school's principal. Carrying a knife, he breached the sanctity of the school. In a terrifying blur of violence, he located and brutally attacked Principal John Gosch. He then turned on school counselor Stephen Secor, inflicting multiple stab wounds. The school, a place designed for safety and learning, was instantly transformed into a literal crime scene. A battleground, born of one man's unbridled fury. Chaos erupted, students and staff caught in a terrifying lockdown, hid in classrooms, their innocent world shattered by an adult's violent outburst. The screams of fear, the sirens of responding police and paramedics painted a grim new reality. The immediate consequence was devastating. Principal John Gosch, 56, tragically succumbed to his injuries. Counselor Stephen Secor, 48, survived, but was critically wounded. Stankiewicz was quickly apprehended within the school, still holding the knife. He was charged with murder, attempted murder, and other offenses. His trial detailed the cold, premeditated nature of his attack. In September 2002, William Michael Stankiewicz's was convicted of first-degree murder for the death of Principal Gosch and attempted murder for the attack on Secor. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murder, plus an additional 20 to 40 years for the attempted murder. The consequences of the North Hopewell Winterstown Elementary attack reverberated far beyond the courtroom. It was a stark, brutal awakening to the fact that even seemingly ordinary individuals consumed by private demons could unleash unimaginable violence upon innocent spaces. The case spurred renewed focus on school security, visitor protocols, and threat assessment. Stankiewicz's actions stand as a chilling example of how unchecked personal rage can erupt into a public nightmare, forever scarring a community, and reminding us that the threat to a school's sanctity can come from unexpected, even familiar directions. His name became synonymous with the violation of a safe learning environment, a permanent stain on the peace of a small Pennsylvania town. 8. Craig Michael Wood in rural Missouri. Craig Michael Wood, born in 1971, was a high school teacher, a figure of authority shaping young minds. His role was to educate, to guide, to protect. Yet in one of the most chilling betrayals of trust imaginable, Wood would irrevocably stain the very notion of a safe learning environment, plunging a community into unimaginable grief. The terrifying saga began in August 2021 with the disappearance of a 15-year-old female student. Her sudden vanishing sent ripples of fear through the tight-knit community. The search was desperate, but the answers that emerged were far more sinister than anyone could have prepared for. Investigators swiftly focused on Craig Michael Wood, the very teacher entrusted with her education. Evidence quickly mounted directly connecting him to her disappearance and ultimate demise. His property, not a classroom, but a place tied to his trusted role, became a literal crime scene, a site where innocence was brutally extinguished. The nature of his crime was horrifying. Wood was charged with kidnapping and first-degree murder. His motive, later revealed, was to prevent the victim from reporting him for sexual misconduct. This was not merely a breach of professional ethics. It was a cold, calculated act of depravity. A teacher orchestrating a murder to protect his own vile secrets. The community reeled in shock and disgust. The idea that such evil resided within someone they had implicitly trusted Someone who stood at the front of a classroom was unbearable. The consequences for Craig Michael Wood were swift and absolute. In February 2023, facing overwhelming evidence, Wood pleaded guilty to the charges, including first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. This verdict ensured he would never again walk free, never again pose a threat, never again betray the sacred trust placed in an educator. Craig Michael Wood's case stands as a chilling reminder that the wolf can sometimes wear the disguise of a shepherd. It highlights the profound need for constant vigilance, not just against strangers, but against those in positions of profound trust, whose darkness can turn a place of learning into the scene of an unspeakable crime. His name will forever be synonymous with the ultimate betrayal, a permanent scar on the landscape of public trust. 9. Toshimi Wilson. Toshimi Wilson, a teacher at Amory High School in Mississippi, epitomized this trusted role. His classroom was meant to be a safe haven, a place of learning and growth. But for his young male students, it became a terrifying stage for manipulation and abuse. Born in 1975, Wilson's actions would forever define his name. The chilling truth about Toshimi Wilson surfaced when allegations of his misconduct came to light. The nature of his crime was the sexual exploitation of students, a profound betrayal of the very trust he was mandated to uphold. This wasn't a sudden, impulsive act. It was a calculated, insidious process of grooming that spanned nearly a decade from 2005 to 2014. As a teacher and advisor for the Technology Students of America, TSA Group, Wilson held a unique position of power and authority, which he systematically exploited. He used his access and influence to create an environment where his predatory actions could occur. Reports indicate Wilson would coerce male students into producing sexually explicit videos and pictures in exchange for money and even drugs. These acts occurred in various locations, including school bathrooms, a rented office space, and even public places like a Walmart bathroom. Disturbingly, some incidents even happened during out-of-town school trips with the TSA group he advised. His classroom, meant for education, became a place where boundaries were deliberately blurred and innocence was systematically eroded. The bravery of the victims was paramount. It was their courage, their willingness to speak out against a figure of authority that finally brought Wilson's crimes into the open. Once a former student reported the abuse to a counselor, federal and state investigations began revealing a pattern of abuse involving at least 11 former students. Federal and local authorities launched an immediate, thorough investigation, evidence including Wilson's own admission to discarding a hard drive containing illicit materials mounted. Toshimi Wilson was charged with multiple counts related to the sexual exploitation of children. The legal process was a testament to the victim's strength and the justice system's commitment to protecting children. In December 2023, a federal jury convicted Toshimi Wilson on 8 counts of sexual exploitation of a child. The consequences he faced were severe, reflecting the gravity of his profound betrayal. In May 2024, he was sentenced to a staggering 192 years in federal prison, ensuring he would never again have the opportunity to harm a child or abuse the sacred trust of an educational setting. He was also ordered to pay over $123,000 in restitution to his victims. Wilson's case stands as a stark, painful reminder of how predators can operate within respected institutions, systematically grooming and exploiting those under their care. It underscores the critical importance of listening to children, believing them, and acting swiftly on any concern, no matter how small. His story cemented a vital lesson: the classroom must remain an inviolable sanctuary. When a teacher turns that space into a crime scene, the legal system and society must respond with absolute conviction, ensuring that those who destroy innocence behind the guise of education are held fully accountable for their monstrous acts. 10. James Talbot. Our final case brings us to James Talbot, a figure once deeply embedded in the educational fabric of Syracuse, New York. Born in 1947, Talbot was more than just a teacher. He was an administrator, a coach, a seemingly respected leader at prestigious institutions like Christian Brothers Academy and Manlius Pebble Hill School. For decades, he moved through the lives of countless students, earning trust, shaping young futures. But behind this esteemed facade lay a horrific secret. Talbot was a predator, systematically abusing his position for nearly 40 years, turning classrooms, locker rooms, and even school trips into his hunting grounds. The chilling truth about James Talbot began to unravel, not in a classroom, but through a different kind of investigation. In 2012, law enforcement arrested him not initially for direct abuse, but for the possession of child pornography. This initial charge was just the tip of a terrifying iceberg. News of his arrest prompted an avalanche of courage. Former students, now adults, began to come forward, finally ready to share their unspeakable experiences. Their stories, spanning back to the 1970s and 80s, revealed the true scope of his depravity. The nature of his crime was widespread. Child sexual abuse, often involving sexual contact with both male and female students. Talbot meticulously used his multifaceted roles as a teacher, a coach, and administrator to gain unparalleled access and trust. He isolated victims, exploited their vulnerability, and used his authority to groom and silence them. The very institutions meant to protect these children became unwitting enablers of his decades-long reign of terror. His pattern of abuse was methodical, hidden by the implicit trust placed in educators, and tragically, by systemic failures that allowed him to move unchallenged for far too long. This was delayed justice decades in the making. The bravery of these adult survivors finally speaking out, after years of silence and trauma, was immense. They shattered the silence that had protected Talbot for so long. Facing multiple charges, James Talbot ultimately entered a plea deal in 2013, pleading guilty to possessing child pornography and admitting to the sexual abuse of former students. He was sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison. For the victims, this sentence, though a legal outcome, could never truly account for the decades of psychological damage and the immense betrayal they endured. The initial charges only scratched the surface of the vast trauma he inflicted. Civil lawsuits followed, further exposing the widespread impact of his actions and raising critical questions about institutional accountability and cover-ups. The consequences of James Talbot's reign of abuse were profound, impacting countless lives and forcing a painful reckoning within educational and even religious institutions he had been affiliated with. His case became a stark example of how predators can operate with impunity for decades, when systems lack robust oversight and clear reporting pathways. It highlighted the devastating reality of delayed justice and the courage required for survivors to finally confront their abusers. James Talbot eventually served his time, released from prison, but for his victims, the scars remain permanent. His name stands as a chilling monument to the insidious power of trust betrayed, and a stark reminder that we must relentlessly pursue every avenue to protect children, no matter how long it takes for the truth to emerge.